Hi everyone. Today I'll be looking at an excerpt from the Confiteor movement of Bach's B minor Mass, which is a fugue for 5-part choir and continuo. The principles and rules for writing 5-part tonal counterpoint are essentially the same as writing for fewer parts. In 5-part writing, however, 7th chords may be vertically sounded, with one of their notes being either doubled or tripled. Triads also must have one or more of their notes doubled or tripled to create 5 parts. Which note to double, as always, depends on context and the melodic contours of each part. Although consecutive fifths, octaves and unisons are still largely avoided, because of the denser texture, occasionally composers may allow certain consecutives to occur. Here, for example, Bach doubles the leading note's resolution, producing consecutive unisons, a doubling which would not be tolerated in works of fewer parts. And hidden octaves and fifths especially probably occur more frequently in thicker textures than in works of 4 parts. Here, for example, hidden octaves occur between the first and second sopranos, and here between the second soprano and tenor. Hidden fifths are also found here between the tenor and bass. In all of these examples, recurring features of the consecutives mitigate their use. The consecutive unisons and this hidden octave, for example, both occur between inner parts and are therefore less exposed. The doubled leading note also is here part of an interrupted cadence and resolves to the third of submediant harmony and not the root note of the tonic. Also, the alto's resolution is part of the fugue subject and is therefore more prominent than the second soprano's motion. This hidden octave and these hidden fifths also, although they involve one outer voice of the texture, have one of their parts moved by step, thereby lessening the effect of the consecutives. This hidden octave, although it occurs between inner parts, also moves in a similar way. In all of these examples, Bach would not have written these consecutives because he had run out of options or was unaware of their presence. Instead, he would have known of their existence but decided their inclusion was acceptable. Remember, an increase in occurrences of hidden consecutives and denser contrapuntal textures should not be an excuse for not learning correct contrapuntal writing. In many of Bach's 5-part textures, suspensions typically occur in the upper parts. In this excerpt, for example, only 2 suspensions are found in an inner voice, while all others are found in the first and second soprano parts. Especially leading up to cadences, Bach will often use more than one suspension in the bars before the cadence. Here, for example, the first soprano includes a 4-3 suspension, while the second soprano includes a 7-6 suspension, whose construction is formed as part of the subject motif. Motivic usage may also be found here, where this figure in the first soprano is a rhythmic diminution of the final notes of the tenor's answer entry plus this half note. And this leap of a sixth in the first soprano is also used here and here. In 5-part works, the parts still essentially move through a combination of similar, oblique and contrary motion. Voice exchange is used between 2 harmonies or to prolong single harmonies. And parts often move in pairs, as can be seen throughout this excerpt, where the tenor and bass are essentially paired, while the second soprano and alto largely move together, although the first soprano often joins their motion, or the second soprano and alto will occasionally move into the first soprano's register. Despite these pairings, however, interaction between all parts still occurs, as we've already seen with the voice exchanges between the lower and upper parts. Across shorter sections or phrases, much tonal and modal music descends across its duration. This is partly due to the resolutions of suspensions and chordal sevenths, which typically resolve downwards. In contrapuntal works, particularly in upper parts, when one of these resolutions occurs, rather than having the resolving line leap or ascend after the resolution, often a lower part will leap above the resolving part to continue the upper line. Here, for example, as the 4/3 suspension in the first soprano resolves, the alto leaps above the first soprano to continue the upper melody. The alto then returns to its own register, allowing the first soprano to prepare another 4/3 suspension, the resolution of which sounds below the second soprano's 7/6 suspension preparation, which here leaps to the top of the texture as part of the subject motif. The first soprano then regains the highest register to resolve cadentially to the raised third of dominant harmony. Part crossing then, in these contexts, can be a means of maintaining a texture's upper melody, which here, after a descent from F sharp, essentially oscillates between D and C sharp before returning to F sharp for the cadence. As always, as in contrapuntal textures of any number, when thematic or subject material is included, its presence acts like a cantus firmus to which the other parts must accommodate. Here at the cadence, for example, inclusion of the second soprano's motif influences the melodic and harmonic choices through these bars, with Bach harmonizing the C sharp and B sharp, which is raised, as a secondary 2/5 cadence to F sharp minor's dominant. And here, the presence of both the tenor and bass's subject entries influences the shape and contours of the upper parts, such as with the use of this interrupted cadence, the root notes of which follow the notes of the subject, and, as I've already mentioned, Bach's use of this rhythmic diminution of part of the tenor's subject entry, which essentially moves in similar motion. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.